Friends, welcome to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It's not difficult for you, but it's nice for me, and we're starting. And then a light bulb lit up above my head, as it happens in cartoons when a character gets an idea or an answer to a question. Damn it, my third child wasn't really mine, but another man's biological daughter. I was on the phone with a representative wondering why, 10 weeks later, my daughter's DNA test had not been processed. I gave her the test as an extra Christmas present and gave the representative the appropriate numbers so they could track it. After about a 5-minute wait, he returned to the line and assured me that the test had been processed. Also, it was a privacy issue between the company and the person who actually submitted the test, and he can't give me any additional information. But if you processed it, then why doesn't it show up in my DNA tests? I asked excitedly. Sir, there are several reasons why your daughter might not show up in your DNA tests, but I have no right to discuss this particular test with you, he replied in a somewhat irritated tone, and then the light bulb came on. Obviously, the number one reason it doesn't show up in my matches is because it doesn't suit me. I ended the conversation in a daze. I remember pressing the red end call button, and then I started crying. I woke up a few minutes later, curled up in the fetal position on the couch in the living room. I still had 15 minutes left before the end of my lunch break, so I called my daughter, who probably had a lunch break too, since she worked in the same time zone as me. I know that during lunch she usually curls up with a book at her desk, so I wasn't worried about interrupting her. She picked up the phone on the first ring. Hi, Dad, how are you? She said a little warily. Pumpkin, you know that I love you and trust you completely, but I know what's going on with the DNA test, I bluffed. I called genealogy gurus and they told me that it was processed about 2 weeks ago. There was a sound of air being sucked in from her side and then silence for at least 10 seconds. I know, Dad, we need to talk, but I can't do it here and now. Call me tonight and don't be in the room with your mom when you call. I was in a daze as I drove back to my office, and I have to admit that I didn't provide my boss with a productive day at the engineering firm where I worked. There were so many things going on in my head, so many questions, and the thought that my little girl is not my little girl. Being an analyst by nature, I knew that I had to prioritize and solve problems one at a time. It was not for nothing that I was vice president of engineering at Sycophus Electronics, and at the moment, I knew that the best thing for me was to treat my personal problems as if they were project problems and solve them in an orderly manner. The old man, Dwayne Sycophus, taught me this himself when he hired me straight from Purdue University to work for his then young company. With Dwayne at the helm and me never far from his right hand, Sycophus has grown into an industry leader, and we've both made huge profits. I made great money, had great benefits, and worked with great, smart people. And when I returned home in the evening, a beautiful wife and 3 wonderful children were waiting for me there. Eventually, the children grew up, left home, got married, and had children of their own. At first, we were a little lonely in the house, but we found a lot to do, and it seemed to me that being alone again revived us as a couple. But looking back over the last month of my life, I noticed several small incidents, including Marissa's phone call to my wife about 2 weeks ago. On Tuesday evening, we were both sitting in the family room. In American homes, there are separate living rooms and family rooms, and watching TV when Tracy's phone rang. She looked at him and said it was Marissa, and then she answered. The conversation lasted about 5 minutes. Tracy answered almost only yes and no, and I could see tears welling up in the corners of her eyes. When she hung up, I asked if everything was okay, and she told me that Marissa's cat was having health problems. It's okay, she said, although I noticed that she seemed a little nervous next to me. It seemed a little strange to me that she took the health of Marissa's cat so much to heart. Marissa must have found out about it from that phone call. Tracy didn't know that I sent Marissa a test. I didn't think it was worth paying attention to. Marissa was the only one of the 3 children who was even slightly interested in genealogy, so I bought a set online and sent it to her. I've been researching my family roots for many years, and I really liked the part about DNA analysis. I thought it would be great for Marissa to take the test. Obviously, I was wrong. When I got home, I tried my best not to behave differently towards Tracy, even though I was seething inside. Work on one problem at a time, I repeated to myself. I met Tracy at Purdue in my sophomore year. We didn't meet until our senior year, but we've been inseparable ever since, or so it seemed to me. We got married a year after graduating from college, 31 years ago. and until today I would have told anyone that it was the best decision of my life. At the age of 54, she is still beautiful, and despite the fact that she has 3 children, she regularly exercises and has the body of a woman who is over 30. She is funny, and until today I was looking forward to spending the rest of my life with her. Around 8 o'clock, I told Tracy that I needed to call the old man about a project we were working on, and left the room. In fact, I took my jacket and went outside to the porch swing to talk without fear that Tracy would hear. And then I called Marissa. Marissa answered on the first call, and she sounded completely upset. "I'm sorry, Dad. I know I should have told you earlier, but Mom asked me not to say anything until she had a chance to talk to you first," she stammered before I could say hello. "I'm not mad at you. Calm down," I said as reassuringly as I could. "I'm not accusing you of anything. You're just as much a victim as I am." I could hear her breathing heavily on the phone. I knew it was killing her. "Reese, I want you to know that this doesn't change anything in our relationship. I'm still your father, and you're still my pumpkin. I've always given you kids all my love, and after all this, I'm not going to stop now until you want me to stop." At that moment, she fell apart, almost incoherently mumbling into the phone. "I love you, Daddy. I don't need anyone but you. You're mine, pumpkin. Look, I don't want to put you in the middle, but you're my best source of DNA information. We're not going to discuss the rest so you don't end up in the middle of things, but I need to know if you had a DNA match." "Yes, Dad, we were," she sighed. "Amanda Anderson turned out to be my stepsister." "Mandy? Uncle George and Aunt Ginny's Mandy? Oh, holy shit. I'm sorry, Daddy," she said softly. "It's not your fault, pumpkin. You don't need to apologize to me ever," I said as calmly as I could. This meant that George Anderson, Uncle George to my children, appellate court judge George Anderson to most of the rest of the world, was Marissa's biological father. Damn it. This meant that my wife made love to her boss when he was a lawyer at the law firm Gooey Howe and Associates. That meant it was at least 25 years ago, given that Marissa was 24 years old. At the time, Tracy was his administrator. A few years later, he left the firm and became a state judge, moving to the state capital before his career really took off. For her part, Tracy did not continue her relationship with George, but preferred to stay at Gooey Howe and eventually took up the position of office manager. But in the few years that George and Tracy worked together, he and his wife Ginny became such good friends that our children still call them Uncle and Aunt, and their children also call me and Tracy. And several times when I was away on a business trip, Tracy and the kids came to George and Ginny's house by the lake for a few days. Oh shit. The children even talked several times about Aunt Ginny taking them back and forth with her. Neither Uncle George nor Mom were with them, and I didn't even think about it. Damn it. I must have blacked out at that moment because I heard Marissa calling out to me. "Daddy? Daddy?" "Sorry, pumpkin. I was lost in my thoughts. Thanks for the help, kid. Give my best wishes to Drew." "Wait, Dad. What are you going to do?" It was a legitimate question, but I didn't have a good answer, so I just told her the truth. "I don't know, kid." "Well, don't go and do something incredibly stupid, Dad. It's okay to be a little stupid, but you don't need to get arrested or anything like that." I hadn't thought about shooting Tracy until that moment, but I had promised Marissa that I wouldn't be arrested, so I guess shooting was out of the equation. I never break the promises I made to my children. Reassuring Marissa about our relationship was my number one task, and finding out who Tracy's accomplice in the crime was my second task. Task number 3 was to start the divorce process after finding a new lawyer, because my current lawyer belongs to the firm where Tracy works. This, of course, could not be done. As soon as I have a chance to talk to a lawyer, I will take care of the future former Mrs. Clark Walters. It was cool at home. When we were together, Tracy chatted like a magpie. I guess it was just out of nerves. She seemed to be trying her best to make me happy, believing that it might mitigate the consequences when I found out. I don't know, but there was definitely a distance between us, and she wasn't going to be the one to break the ice. About a week later, I met with a lawyer, and when he found out that my wife works as an office manager at Gooey Howe, he had a very nervous expression on his face. So I moved on to the next lawyer on my list, a woman in her early 20s who just smiled when I mentioned that Tracy was an office manager at Gooey Howe. That's who I was looking for. A man who wouldn't be scared when one of Gooey's big lawyers took over representing my wife. I outlined what little I knew about the cheating scenario, starting, of course, by learning that my youngest child was not biologically mine, and found out that she was Judge Anderson's child. Judge Anderson of the Court of Appeals? My lawyer, a certain Marie Robinette, asked. That's the one, I replied, watching her face to see if I needed to find another lawyer. It will be wonderful, was all she said in response, after which we began to discuss financial issues. Since we both had good jobs, pensions, and benefits, Marie offered to split the joint property in half, keep our pensions, and sell the house. As a result, we will both remain in prosperity, although I will be in a slightly better position, since I will have a larger income and a better pension. Unless you really want to crush her because of infidelity, a child, or a general lack of respect, she added quickly, looking for a moment as if she might just jump on the conference table to try to repair the wrongs inflicted on me. We'll have our payback, I'm sure of that, but I don't want to cause her financial damage, I replied. What about the judge? Will we pursue him for anything? Because if so, it will be much more difficult and will significantly increase your score. The judge is my problem, and I'll take care of it as I see fit, I snapped, perhaps too sharply. Got it, she replied. If she doesn't resist, it could take 6 months, Marie said. If she resists, then we can talk about more than a year. I don't have any specific dates yet, so take your time and do it right, I told her. When the third task was completed, it was time for the fourth, disassembly. I waited another week, just to see if Tracy's head would explode in that time. Saturday night was our usual date night, then we'd come home, watch a movie, and make love. But Saturday love was always special because we went to bed early. However, we haven't dated in 2 weeks, and we haven't had love for the same amount of time, because I just couldn't bring myself to do it after I found out about cheating and Marissa. Tracy didn't even ask herself that question, another sign that she knew I was aware, but she was very good at pretending. However, this had to come to an end. I invited her to a nice French restaurant. We shared a bottle of wine and even tasted great desserts. She was happier than I had seen her in recent weeks. And when we got home, I carefully took off her coat, led her to the kitchen table, pulled out a chair for her, and said these famous words. We need to talk. Tracy only smiled slightly when I poured myself a Jack Daniels on the rocks and offered her something from the wine cabinet, which she delicately declined. I put my drink on the table, looked her straight in the eye, and said, You have the floor. That was a long time ago, Clark. George and I haven't slept together for about 20 years. Can't we just leave it as a mistake from a long time ago and forget about it? I have to admit, I was glad she wasn't trying to say the DNA test was wrong, but trying to brush it off by saying it was so long ago that it shouldn't matter anymore. Really? Okay, the last time you made love together was about 20 years ago. When did you start making love? How often and why did you finally stop? I need all of this. But first of all, I need to know if baby number 1 and baby number 2 are his too. No, Clark. Barry and Katie are yours. I haven't slept with George yet, about a year after Katie was born. At first, the affair lasted about 3 years, and then stopped when George decided to leave the firm and move up the judicial ladder. He waited about a year after we broke up to take up his first position as a judge, because he wanted to make sure that a background check would show that he was clean. And after that, we only made love a few times at the lake house, when Ginny innocently took all the children for afternoon entertainment. Ginny didn't know anything at the time either, although George eventually told her, and later the three of us had a peaceful powwow, meeting of North American Indians, at which both George and I promised her that there would be no more love. Why didn't you ever tell me about this and try to have a peaceful wow with me? Am I a fucking chopped liver? I asked sharply. Tracy wiped her hands on her sleeves and replied, I knew I'd never be able to tell you. You would have divorced me in an instant, and I didn't want that. I loved you, and I still do. I guess you just loved George more, I said. Start and stop at his command without thinking about me. I was your backup. No, Clark, I love you with all my heart, she begged. No, you loved him with all your heart. You loved him so much that you gave up on him so that he could realize his career dream, knowing at the same time that I was your backup plan. You may have loved me to some extent, but you knew that I, damn it, idolized the ground you walk on, and you hoped that this and our family would help you get over his loss. Tracy looked down at her lap. The truth hurt, and I knew I'd hit the nail on the head. But what about Marissa? Obviously, he was using you, and you should have known what that could lead to, and it did. I just thought that since you both have brown hair, brown eyes, and fair skin, no one will ever guess whose child this is. And I knew you'd have no reason to think she wasn't yours, so when she started looking like me anyway, I didn't have to worry about it. until you sent her that damn DNA test. To be honest, I didn't know anything before that. So it's my fault? I asked incredulously. No. George and I discussed this possibility, but I told him that he shouldn't worry, since you both have similar physical characteristics. As far as I know, he didn't know either, but I'm sure Mandy has already brought him up to speed. I haven't received any messages from him for at least a couple of years, since they were at Marissa and Drew's wedding 2 years ago. Well, no matter who knows what, Marissa is still mine as far as I'm concerned, and that's exactly what I told her. I'm on the birth certificate. I raised her. I love her. She's mine. George better not have any ideas about this, and if he calls, you better tell him about it. And by the way, I'm going to do a DNA test on the other 2 kids as soon as possible. I need to know this for my own peace of mind. Clark, Tracy hissed. I told you they were yours, and you expect me to trust you. Why? I snapped. Like everything else, Tracy was completely overwhelmed by my newfound lack of trust. What did she expect? But I know that she was also very worried that I would tell the other 2 children about her infidelity. No one wants to look like a fool in front of their own children. So, how often did you do this and where? Finish the story at least for me, I chided. We didn't plan this, Clark, it just happened that way. We spent so much time working together and then we became friends and it turned into something more. He was kind, attentive, witty, funny, passionate. You know this man, and we got closer on a deeper level. But since we had spouses we both loved, we kept everything to a minimum and changed meeting places, usually out of town. No, we've never met here or at his place. This would be wrong on several levels. But that didn't stop the 2 of you from making love several times at the lake house after the affair supposedly ended while Ginny was spending the day with the kids, I mused aloud. No, it's not like that, she practically whispered to me. But I swear to you, we haven't been intimate since. And Ginny knows all this and forgave you both? I asked, shaking my head in disbelief. Yes, I told you. I don't think I can, I blurted out, and the sound of my voice became hoarse with surging emotions. We know what we did was wrong, Clark, but it's been 20 years, and it's never hurt you while all this was going on. So can't we just go back to what happened a few weeks ago? You were my loving husband. I was your loving wife. Nothing should change. But things have already changed, Tracy, I said. I've spent the better part of 3 weeks wondering what I did wrong, that you fell in love with another man, and wondering if I could ever trust you completely again, let alone trust you enough to stay married to you. I gave you my heart completely, and you put it in your pocket and took it out when it was convenient for you. It wasn't supposed to be a marriage of convenience. It was supposed to be a full-time, total love marriage. At that moment, Tracy started crying. I hate it when she does that, and I usually try to comfort her. But this time it was different. I went into the family room and turned on the TV, leaving her at the kitchen table. We slept in the same bed that night, but for the first time in a while, we didn't cuddle up to each other. I moved as far away from her as possible on the double bed and did not let her move closer to me when she climbed inside. Her expression was one of shock and pain at the same time, but I didn't care. Tracy made us a nice breakfast on Sunday morning, and while we were eating, I brought up the subject of divorce. The novel was more than 20 years ago. For God's sake, you didn't even know about him. It's over, now let's just move on, she practically screamed at me. Wrong is still wrong no matter how long ago it was, I shouted back at her. You deceived me. You lied to me. You cheated on me and broke my trust. It has no statute of limitations. I got up from the table, leaving half a plate of food, and went outside to mow the lawn. This was the last conversation I had with Tracy until Wednesday afternoon, when she informed me that Ginny Anderson would be joining us next weekend. Needless to say, I wasn't thrilled, but Ginny was a longtime close friend and had experienced the same deception as me, so I decided I should chat with her. Ginny showed up at 6 o'clock on Friday evening, after a 2-hour drive from her house. She didn't take George with her. Tracy made a stuffed flank steak with mashed potatoes, and I brought a couple of bottles of Merlot to boot. During dinner, the conversation was light and friendly, and then we retired to the family room with glasses of wine in order, as I assumed, to begin the main event. Ginny began to talk about the novel as a subject of history, very sterile and calm, but as she talked further, she became more and more emotional, and both she and Tracy had tears in their eyes. When George told me about the affair, I assumed it had already ended a couple of years ago, and he promised me that it would never happen again, Ginny said. I admit, At first I was devastated, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that since it was over before I even found out about it, then I probably didn't suffer much. And since I knew Ginny wasn't some kind of gold digger, I understood how this could happen. George's personality seems to attract, doesn't it? Although I didn't know about Marissa until a few weeks ago, when I think everyone found out about it. I'm really sorry about what happened, Clark. Ginny didn't mention anything about the few times Tracy and George had met at the Anderson house by the lake after the end of the main novel. I wondered if they had told her about it. I didn't press him, but I thought George must be a great lawyer, because Ginny was almost apologizing for George having an affair instead of being mad at him. Unfortunately for Tracy, I'm not built like Ginny, and I'm not as impressed with her oratory, so I wasn't ready to give Tracy and George a pass like Ginny, even if their romance ended 20 years ago. I was just thinking about what my life would be like if I left him, and how things would change for me and the girls, she continued. They say you always need to think about whether your life will be better or worse if you leave your spouse, and I know that mine would be worse. Thanks for sharing with me, Ginny. It's definitely food for thought. I will definitely have to think about it, although there are several factors that I must take into account, including the fact that, unlike you, I was not told about the betrayal. I found out about it completely by accident. Tracy knew it was wrong when she did it, and she knew what my reaction would be. So she decided that it would be better for everyone if I never found out and just lived in ignorance. And so it would have been if it hadn't been for the test. And now, 20 years later, I find out that the center of my world loved another man and was close to him, and then turned out to be a saint and left him for his career, returning to me by default. Right, Tracy? My wife didn't say anything during Ginny's reasoning. She just sat quietly while Ginny told her story. All the while, she was sneaking glances in my direction, trying to gauge my reaction. She didn't know that I knew about her surveillance, so I sat impassively while Ginny talked, just to get Tracy a little mad. My reaction to Ginny's story was not what Tracy wanted, and neither did Ginny. They looked at each other with pain in their eyes. I just shook my head, went to the kitchen, poured myself another glass of wine, returned to the family room and turned on the big screen, letting both of them know that they were done talking for today. The women took the hint and moved into the living room, where I could hear their quiet conversation. When everything I was watching was over, I turned off the TV, stuck my head into the living room, said goodnight and headed up the stairs to our bedroom. On Saturday, Ginny found me alone in the family room and said we needed to talk. I had no idea where Tracy was, but I agreed, and we retired to the formal living room and sat on 2 armchairs in the corner. Clark, I understand your pain, I really do. But not forgiving Tracy and divorcing her would be a terrible mistake for both of you, Ginny began. You love her and she loves you. That should be all that matters. The rest is history, and for the 2 of you to spend the rest of your lives apart because of what happened 20 years ago would be terrible. If I can forgive George, then of course you can forgive Tracy. I honestly don't know if I can, Ginny. As I said yesterday, they didn't tell me about the affair, but they told you. They didn't tell me because she knew it was wrong and I wouldn't have forgiven her then. Why should I forgive her now? She cheated on me for 20 years. She had an affair for several years and she cheated on me for another 20 years. How can I forgive her? How can I trust her again? I shook my head, got up and left the room, passing Tracy in the hallway. She was well aware of what I had just discussed with Ginny, and she could see from my expression that I hadn't moved an inch. Dinner on Saturday night was very quiet. The women tried to make small talk. I wasn't interested in it. I didn't say 3 words during the whole dinner. After quickly thanking them, I grabbed my jacket and headed for the exit, telling the couple that I would be at Malone's, my favorite place to have a quiet drink. When I got to Malone's, Ronnie, the woman who owned the bar, was chatting with other patrons in the far corner. Instead of taking a seat at the bar, as I usually do when I enter a restaurant, I sat down at a table alone, feeling unhappy and apparently looking even worse. Marnie, the bartender, came over with my usual Crown Black with ice and made a remark that I looked like my dog had just died. Sort of, but there's nothing as significant as my dog, just my marriage. I giggled unconvincingly. Marnie went over to Ronnie and whispered something in her ear. Ronnie apologized to the customers at the far end of the room and came over to me, sitting across from me at a table. Okay, Superman, spit it out, she said. Ronnie was about my age, a big Irish woman with freckles and red hair, which she wore as a distinctive symbol. She didn't take shit from anyone, but in case someone did shit on her, her husband, Moose, was cooking in the back of the restaurant. Moose was 6'3", 190 centimeters tall and weighed 280, 127 kilograms. He was a former Marine sergeant. Malone's wasn't a harsh place, but things got out of hand at the bar sometimes, but I only saw it once. The abuser was rude to Ronnie, and when she snapped back, he didn't have the sense to close his mouth. Moose struck him once and then pinned the dumbass to the floor with his foot until the cops arrived to restore order. Ronnie called me Superman because of my name. She said it reminded her of Clark Kent, and she swore to everyone that even though I was a good guy with a good job, she wouldn't want to see me get mad. We've always had a good laugh about it. I've been coming to Malone's for 20 years, sometimes with Tracy, sometimes without her, sometimes to eat, sometimes just to drink. Ronnie and Moose knew both Tracy and me well, and she was pretty good at reading people, including me. She was like the sister I never had. Tracy and I are done, I began. Up to this point, I hadn't told anyone anything, and frankly, it was nice to finally talk it out. I found out that she cheated on me with her boss about 20 years ago. Not once, not several times, but for 4 fucking years. And at the same time, my youngest, Marissa, is his. And she thinks that since it was so long ago and I didn't know about it when it happened, then I should just accept it and move on. She says she loves me, has always loved me, and doesn't want to get divorced. What a lying little fool, Ronnie exclaimed. How dare she? You're not going to just spit on it and let her stay, are you? If this had happened to Moose and me, he would have tied my ass to the wall and hung the guy's skin next to it. It was nice to hear that Ronnie agreed with me. I really appreciated her sound and unbiased view of things, and if she thought otherwise, it would definitely make me reconsider my position. Look, Superman, this is as much a matter of respect as anything else. I love Tracy. No, I loved Tracy. But her deception was not out of love, and certainly not out of respect. How could she let you think all these years that another man's child was yours? I explained the Marissa story to Ronnie, pointing out that Tracy didn't really know for sure. But Ronnie ignored it, saying that refusing to test the child was a convenient way of saying that she didn't want to know. Has she ever apologized for this affair? Or at least just said she was sorry for hurting you? Damn, this woman was good. She never apologized for the affair. I don't even think she was apologizing at all for hurting me. I think the only thing she really apologized for was what I found out, I said. I can't tell you what to do, Superman, but I think she's already told you what to do. I'm sorry, Clark. Today the crown is on Moose and me. The rest of the bottle is yours, and we'll call you a taxi at the end of the evening. Give me your keys. I did everything as I was told. The taxi driver took me to my house around 2 o'clock in the morning. Tracy met us at the door and helped guide me up the stairs to our bedroom. I fell into bed fully dressed. Tracy took off my shoes and socks, and so I fell asleep. Late on Wednesday evening, my son called my office. He wanted to talk to me about Tracy's situation. He didn't say it, but apparently Tracy decided that she needed to bring in the heavyweights, the kids, to talk me out of a divorce. My son and I are usually on the same page on most issues, but from talking to him, I realized that Tracy put in a lot of effort, and it paid off, because he definitely saw her point of view on this divorce. Dad, divorcing Mom would be the stupidest thing to do since you wore a suit to go out in the 70s, he tried to joke with me. Seriously, Dad, a divorce? For what she did 20 years ago, which you only found out about a few weeks ago? This is the woman you told just a few weeks ago that you loved and wanted to spend the rest of your life with her. And now you're ready to give it all up and maybe live the rest of your life alone because of a mistake. Seriously, Dad? To begin with, Barry, it would be a mistake to do what she did the first few times she made love to him. After a few months, this is a decision, not a mistake. And what would you do if you found out that Linda was cheating on you? I probably would have torn her head off, but you didn't catch her. It was all over 20 years ago. The physical act was over. The deception and lack of respect continued, I replied coldly. Barry, I thought you were smart enough to stay out of this and not take sides. But you got into a place where no child should get into. You got between your parents. And for what, Barry? I'm not going to change my mind. I'm the injured party here, and you're just pissing me off. I put this woman on a pedestal. I worshipped her, and she knew it. She wasn't going to tell me about it at all, and if it weren't for an unforeseen event, I would have gone to my grave worshipping her, while she just used me as a second option when the man she loved the most didn't marry her. Do I feel used, Barry? You can be sure of that. Dad, aren't you being too dramatic? I think he was still talking when I hung up. When I walked in the door around 6 in the evening, Tracy had almost cooked a delicious-smelling dinner. She didn't look happy when I said I wasn't hungry, poured some Jack into a glass, turned on the TV, and sat down in my favorite chair. She came in and asked what happened. The same shit, but on a different day. My wife has been cheating on me for 4 years. She has a child with another guy, and now my kids are telling me that I'm the bad guy here. Do me a favor. Call Katie tonight and tell her not to call me tomorrow unless she wants me to hang up like I did with Barry. Tracy lowered her eyes. You'd think that after 31 years, she doesn't know that other people shouldn't make me angry because of her. What on earth makes you think the divorce won't happen? I asked, raising my voice. You not only cheated on me for 4 years with another man and had a child with him, but also replaced me with him in your heart. Can you sit here and tell me that you weren't in love with him, and that if he had asked you to divorce me and marry him, you wouldn't have done it? And here's the thing. You can love me, but you're not in love with me. You're in love with him. I'm just a reliable backup plan, because you always knew that my heart belongs to you, and I'm ready to do anything for you, just to have you. You cheated on me. You cheated on me. You didn't respect me, and now you have the nerve to try to turn our children against me. That was the last straw, Trace. But no, I won't be cruel to you, and especially to Ginny, and I won't ruin George's wonderful career as a spotlessly clean judge. I'll file a statement of irreconcilable differences, and we can each keep our retirement accounts and split the house and everything else in half. Tears were rolling down Tracy's cheeks fast and furiously, and when she got up from her chair, I threw her another sentence. You still haven't told me that you regret cheating? Probably because you don't regret it, which is at least honest. The only thing you regret is what I found out, right? I spent the rest of the evening hugging a bottle of Jack. The next day, I called my lawyer and told her that she needed to prepare the divorce papers as soon as possible. She said I could review them next Tuesday. She would prepare them on Wednesday and Tracy could be handed over on Thursday. I told her to bring her bailiff to my house on Friday evening. I wanted to be there when she was served. Then I called Judge George Anderson's office and told his receptionist that I needed him to call me back on an important matter. He knew exactly why I was calling, and I was sure he would call me back as soon as possible. George seemed a little worried when he called me back about 2 hours later. Yes, he knew exactly why I was calling, although he didn't think he would want to do it in his office. I completely agreed and told him that I would come to meet him at his and Ginny's house next Saturday at 10 a.m. He doesn't know that Tracy is going to be served the night before, although I'm sure that by the time I make the 2-hour drive to his luxurious home, he will already know about it. Over dinner at Malone's on Saturday night, Tracy admitted that Ginny had called her and told her about my meeting with George the following Saturday. She wanted to know if I needed company on the road. This is not a social call, Tracy, I said. George and I have a lot to talk about and you don't need to be there. You might want to remember that he is a judge of the Court of Appeals with an excellent reputation, who one day may be on the short list of candidates for the post of judge of the Supreme Court. If you start any macho shit with him, you could get arrested, and besides, you promised me you wouldn't do anything to hurt his career. That's right, you're choosing him again, not me. But don't worry, I intend to keep my promise. I will not do anything that could cause him to be excluded from the short list of potential Supreme Court justices. God forbid, the show must go on. After I told the old man in the office about what was going on in my life, I set aside a couple of personal hours and met with my lawyer to check the divorce papers. I gave her the go-ahead. When I was about to leave, she asked if I had any plans for Judge George. Why would you worry about that? I asked, winking at her. Because I also continue to handle some criminal cases and I think you may need a good lawyer. You engineers don't seem to be too emotional about a lot of things, but I know you're pretty stressed and your methodical approach scares me. She handed me her business card and I left the office. The next 3 days passed quickly. We were doing a big project in the office and it allowed me to focus on something other than my life. The old man even told me that he was amazed at how focused I was, despite all the troubles in my life. I told him I was glad that at least something was going right. But on Friday night, before I left, I told him that Tracy was being served and that I was dating George, and warned him that if everything went wrong, I could end up in jail on Monday. He assured me that he would have my back, and my bail money. We parted after shaking hands. I returned home where another wonderful-smelling dinner was waiting for me, prepared by Tracy. Lately, she's been going out of her way to get me to pay attention to her many skills. She was really a great cook. I almost felt guilty because I knew what would happen after dinner. We ate mostly in silence, as we have for the last few weeks, although I did not fail to tell her how wonderful the dish was. After all, I'm not an ungrateful bastard. Then I helped her put the dishes away, but just as we were about to head to the family room for an evening TV viewing, the doorbell rang. It was almost exactly 7 o'clock. I knew it wasn't for me, so I didn't move. Tracy looked at me strangely, then went to the door and opened it. There was a well-dressed young man on the porch who asked Tracy if she was Tracy Walters. When she answered in the affirmative, he handed her an envelope from Manila and said, "You've been served." He turned on his heel and left. Tracy didn't move, but I could tell by the way her shoulders were shaking that she was crying. I walked past her, closed the front door, and taking her by the shoulders, led her to the kitchen table. She looked completely shocked, even though I told her it was going to happen. We sat in silence, which seemed like an eternity to me, but in fact probably lasted only 5 minutes. Finally she muttered, "You bastard," and ran upstairs to our bedroom. I didn't follow her. The most difficult thing was done. It was one of the few times since we got married that I didn't sleep in the same bed with Tracy. I went to the bedroom we had set up as a guest room and slept there, although it would be generous to call it a dream. I broke up with a woman whom a few weeks ago I considered the light of my life, my soulmate, my everything. Despite everything that happened, we still slept in the same bed, and I think none of us wanted to be the one to make the first move. But now it was over, at least in my understanding. I got up and took a shower, and when it was time to get dressed, I went very quietly into the bedroom and took everything I needed, trying my best not to wake Tracy and maybe start something. I didn't look to see if she was asleep. I just took my clothes and left. I dressed as usual, a collared shirt, decent Levi's jeans, and cowboy boots with metal tips that I made for myself when we visited our son at his home in Dallas. I left a little earlier than I really needed to. I didn't want to be late for this meeting. If I arrive early, I can always kill time at the cafe, which I did. At 10 o'clock sharp, I was already standing on the porch of George and Ginny's house and ringing the bell. Ginny, looking fine as usual but very nervous, opened the door. "I'm sorry it ends like this," was all I could say as she bent down to hug me. She didn't say anything. She took my hand and led me into the study, where George's photographs and memorabilia were scattered all over the room. George was sitting in his favorite chair, but when we entered, he stood in front of the chair. "Hi, Clark." "Hi, George." Ginny looked very scared when she left the room. We stood about 6 feet, 180 centimeters, apart, and looked into each other's eyes. He was a man whom I once considered almost an older brother. We were so close. George was 2 years older than me, about the same height, but a quiet life over the past 20 years had added about 30 pounds, 13.5 kilograms, to him, and about 20 in his round belly. We shared our hopes and dreams with each other, had fun together, fished together, hunted together. I was proud to call him my friend, proud of where his judicial career had led him. Now, standing in front of me and assessing me with his eyes, he was no longer a friend, but an enemy, a man who stole my wife's love, impregnated her with his child, and ruined my life. I was suddenly filled with rage. "You can keep my wife's heart, you bastard," I yelled at him. "You can also maintain your impeccable image, because I promised Tracy that I would never tell anyone about this, and I do not break my promises to this woman." At that moment, I took a long, fast step forward with my left foot, and then threw my right foot forward and up, making a 50-yard field goal, 3-point, the goal of which was his aforementioned testicles. George reacted even more slowly than I had expected, and my metal-tipped boot hit the target firmly and accurately. At that moment, Ginny ran into the room, saw her husband on the floor, and rushed to him. He continued to scream in agony, and there was nothing she could do to comfort him. She looked at me with anguish. I took my cell phone out of my pocket and dialed 911. "There was an accident at Judge George Anderson's house," I said. "We need an ambulance at this address." I turned on my heel and headed for the door, but before I reached it, Ginny grabbed my right arm. I thought that I would have to hit the woman, but instead of hysteria and anger, a calm expression appeared on her face. She hugged me tightly and whispered, "Thanks. We know what to do." I hugged her back, left the house, got in the car, and drove home, knowing that the cops wouldn't come for me. Ginny understood everything completely and will explain it to her husband someday in the future, when he can think straight. The trip home was interesting. I don't know, but after months of ripping out my heart every day, I felt free. It's funny, but as soon as I finally realized Tracy's betrayal, her power over my heart weakened, and I was able to think clearly enough to do what was right for me. Maybe it wasn't right for everyone, but sometimes you just need to take care of yourself. This is what everyone else has been doing for the last 20 years, so why don't I do it now? Yes, I knew that some part of me would always love Tracy, but I wasn't going to waste any more time studying this novel. It wasn't my fault or my choice. It was time to move forward. When I got home, I went down to the basement, picked up a couple of suitcases, and headed to our bedroom. I walked past Tracy, who was sitting in the family room, and she followed me into the bedroom. "So that's it?" "What is it?" she asked. Just like that, 31 years old and out the door. "Tracy, I'm sorry that you're so fixated on yourself that you can't see how you've offended me. How you stole 24 years of my love with your deception. You don't see it and probably never will. But I've come to terms with it, and I don't hate you. I don't even hate George, although that poor bastard probably thinks so right now. Sometime in the future, I'll come to terms with Barry and Katie. You could also think about making peace with Marissa as soon as possible. The poor girl is in complete turmoil. Sign the papers, Tracy, and let's get this over with. I'll get all my stuff out of here in the next few days. I don't think we need to talk anymore. If there's anything else you need to tell me, I put my lawyer's business card on the kitchen table." She stood in shock. There were tears in her eyes, but there were no words. I picked up the suitcases, went downstairs, and put them in the trunk of my car. I returned to the house, packed up some things, and left. 31 years old, just like that. The epilogue. I lied. The official version says that Judge George fell unsuccessfully on the corner of his ornate desk in the office, hit himself hard, and then did it again when he fell to the floor. The press called it a domestic accident to be delicate, and did not report that the blow fell on the genital area. He received a lot of sympathetic press. I think this will not prevent him from getting on the short list of candidates for the Supreme Court. Tracy signed the divorce papers within a week, and the divorce was finalized last week. The house will be sold at auction. Tracy hasn't tried to call me since I left. Barry and Katie didn't call either. It looks like I won't be invited to the family Christmas dinner, no matter where it takes place. The old man has been handing over the company to me since the new year, since he himself is retiring. The deal is that I have to run the company for 7 years before I can retire as a rich man with a very large golden parachute. Then he'll find someone to buy the company, and I'll get 10% of the deal too. I also started going on dates. After being married for a long time, it will take me a while to remember exactly how it is done. However, word of the divorce spread quickly, and several of our divorced friends called and asked about my interest. Moreover, 2 or 3 of Tracy's divorced friends also called, expressing their surprise that she could even let me leave. I must admit that it's nice for my ego. I have a good life ahead of me, with challenges both professionally and personally. I'm working on finding some new hobbies, using the extra time I have for personal matters. One hobby I've given up is genealogy. I was there, I did it.